Welcome, everybody, to State of Hoops, a South Dakota basketball podcast, episode 3. My name is Todd Schlekeway, co-host of the podcast, and I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Nate Malchow. Nate, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Schleck. November is here, and Hoops is right around the corner, but we have a special guest who has already been busy with a lot of basketball up to this point, and we'll continue to get busier as the season rolls on.
Yeah, that's a great segue to introduce our special guest. We are really privileged to be joined by South Dakotan and NCAA Division I basketball official Kelly Pfeifer. Kelly, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to jump on today.
Hey, happy to be with you guys, and I think the world of both you guys, and I appreciate you having me.
When we decided we were going to do this podcast, Kelly, one of the things Nate and I talked a lot about is we want to tell stories from every angle, and officials are an instrumental part of the game at every level. And so your name came up really early on when we were developing our content calendar for the podcast. We're just grateful to have you on. Can you talk a little bit about your South Dakota background, your roots as a South Dakotan, where you're from, where you went to college, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. I've lived in two places in my life, Philip, South Dakota, and Mitchell. Born and raised in Philip, played basketball there in high school, came to Dakota Wesleyan in the fall of '98, played for Doug Martin for 5 years, had some really good coaches there as well, Jay Drake, Scott Morgan, Ed Plastow. I had some guys that were really fun to be around. I'm going to tell a quick story of you. When I was a sophomore in high school, my dad drove me to Presho to watch Jamie Dieterle and Todd Schlekeway play. I think it was Lonnie Heyer, Cody Ballmer, Lee Severin in a 1-versus-2 Class A basketball game at the Lyman Gardens. And I think you won that night. And then I think they clipped you in regions in Briggs High School. And I went to that one as well.
You have a great memory, Kelly. Fond memories, but that's kind of rubbing salt in the wound, the way that
I'm
one
sorry.
ended. But yeah, no, that's fine. That's the great thing about South Dakota basketball. It's always 1 degree of separation. And we're finding that out as we host more of these episodes on the podcast, Kelly. But you got to Dakota Wesleyan, you played for Doug Martin, one of the very best coaches our state's ever seen at any level. When did you kind of get the itch that, hey, I'm gonna explore this officiating thing for basketball? I love the game. Talk a little bit about what got you into the officiating ranks.
It's hilarious. It was a teammate, Chris Marquardt. His dad, Bill, who just went in the South Dakota Sports Hall of Fame, was the head coach over at Alec at Hanson High.
Yep.
And Chris and I had done some team camp stuff. You know, you have to do fundraisers in college. And Chris goes, hey, we're going to go over and do like a 5th and 6th grade tournament in Alexandria, and did that. And that's how I got started. And then Bill that summer had me ref the Corn Belt team camps. And that was the kind of the kick for me to get going. And then when I got done playing at Wesleyan, Doug Martin said I either needed to get into coaching or officiating. And I got into officiating right after I graduated college.
I always want to know how someone, regardless of the profession, got interested in what they're doing. So, we're on the cusp, Kelly, of a new college basketball season. Talk a little bit about how you prepare mentally and physically for a new season. What are some of the things you do as an official to prepare?
I try to stay in shape year round. As far as the physical side of things, during the summer, I ride a lot of bike. I ride my Peloton. I walk. I do things. My kids are swimmers. Okay. So I swim occasionally, but I don't run as much in the summer. I will ref some. That's about the extent of the running. And then Labor Day rolls around and I get out on a basketball court and I go to our gym, whether it be at the rec center or at Dakota Wesleyan, and I put a timer because in college, we have like media timeouts every 16, 12, 8, 4. So for about a week, I go out and I kind of jog on the court. And I think for a while, people kind of thought I was crazy. And now they kind of look at me and go, oh, it's the referee guy trying to get in shape for the season. So then by week 2, I might be up to a couple media timeouts. And I gradually get my body in that kind of shape, usually starting about September. I like to lift weights. I stretch a lot. Flexibility as we get older is key. Mentally, I'm looking at plays. I'll go back and look at stuff from last year. I got my iPad. I'll just look at things, and I watch a lot of basketball too, and I try to rep when I can during the summers. And I still work the Corn Belt team camp. And I went over and I've always done quite a bit of summer stuff for Paul Seville as well. And when I got started years ago, I would do some summer stuff for him, and it's paid off.
Kelly, what you just talked about, you're hitting the highest levels of officiating in the NCAA, but you still have that South Dakota trait in you to give back, to help things that are going back here in our home state and develop young officials. So as an AD and a former coach, I can just tell you how grateful we are for you doing that and just having that spirit of generosity to continue to give back. So love hearing those stories, and that Corn Belt camp is legendary. I've heard stories about that, and that's awesome.
Yep. Well, Nate, I haven't forgot when we were both coaching track when I first met you. I think we were at a junior high track meet in Watertown, and we chatted about Jay Drake. And I've never forgot that as well, but I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
That's what makes things special, is just, you remember those things. You remember those visits, and you keep the relationships, and it's awesome state to be in terms of the relationships you develop through sports and basketball.
Yeah, I can remember, Kelly, my son coming home. He played a couple summers ago for an AAU team at the Corn Belt Summer Tournament, and he was so thrilled that you were officiating a 13U game. So I can attest to the fact that you put a lot of time in and give back to the game in South Dakota, even though you've ascended to the highest levels of the sport collegiately in your officiating careers. Well done, and just know that you're really appreciated for what you do in this state. You're listening to the State of Hoops, and we are going to transition to a couple ads at this time. Tiefenthaler Real Estate with Hague Realtors. For over 30 years, Pat and Pam Tiefenthaler of Tiefenthaler Real Estate have been trusted names in and around the Sioux Falls community. Building relationships that last, they're humbled and honored to serve buyers and sellers with care and expertise. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or navigating a move because life happens, Pat and Pam will walk beside you, guiding you every step of the way. Call Pat and Pam at Tiefenthaler Homes with Hague Realtors today, your trusted partners in Sioux Falls. Visit tiefteam.hague.com or call 605-321-0550 today.
We'd also like to thank the South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame as one of our sponsors. If you love South Dakota hoops, discover the legacy at the South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame. It's a nonprofit dedicated to preserving our state's rich basketball histories for generations to come. Visit their incredible exhibits at the Sanford Pentagon in Sioux Falls and explore stories, milestones, and legends online at www.sdbbhof.com. From iconic players and coaches to unforgettable teams, this is South Dakota basketball. Again, check out that website and be part of the tradition.
Kelly, one of the things I want to jump into next is kind of the lifestyle of an official at your level on the road. What is a typical week like? What's a typical month like during the height of the college basketball season? Do you want to kind of talk about that and share maybe some insights with our audience? I always find it fascinating that the kind of pull back the curtain, what goes on the road, what life is like. College basketball is on the TV at our home frequently, and it's amazing. One night you'll be in a Big Ten arena, and then the next couple nights later we'll see you in a Big 12 arena. And so you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. There's a lot of times to travel, it's every day is can be different, right? And sometimes there's problems with flights and different things like that. In my 15 years of doing this, I've missed one game due to a travel situation. You get to a motel room, you get rest, you get mentally prepared, you pregame just probably like a coach in a bit. You got to know your personnel. You got to know what teams like to do. Do they press? So we're preparing probably like a team does. And, then you talk about situations and stuff with your partners, and you get ready to go. Eat a good meal, get to the arena in plenty of time. We have to be there way early. You stretch, you get your muscles loosened up, drink lots of water, and go out and do your job to the best of your abilities for 2 hours plus.
That's interesting just to hear that routine and what you do and all the preparation. And I think that gives our listeners just a little insight into how things really are for you. I mean, just the routines and being disciplined and doing those different things. When you work these games, do you typically, just going back to the prep time, do those officials usually arrive at the same time just so you get consistent prep time before the game together?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times we're riding together. If we're coming from an airport, it all depends what direction they're coming from. But yeah, you hop in the car, you go to the arena, you get there, and you get to your room, and it's like your locker room, and you go through your routine. And I'm a routine guy. I do how I stretch, and maybe I have a couple of heat packs and get my legs warmed up. But start putting your uniform on at a certain times. Yeah, you find a routine. Oh, it's pretty neat. Where we live, we're in the middle of the country, so I can go a lot of different directions. But, Sioux Falls is the home airport, and that's where I fly out of.
So that was going to be one of my questions, Kelly. So a lot of your flights are commercial flights, then getting to all these venues that you officiate in, these cities, these markets. Is that mostly commercial flying?
Yes. And I have flown with some guys that here in Mitchell that have planes that have wanted to go places, but it's usually commercial, or you get to a certain location and then you can drive, and weather can be a factor and flights get canceled. You hop in a rental car and you go as well.
It sounds a lot like a coach, Kelly, just kind of with the routines. And I think the coaches have the routines, the referees, everybody associated with it has that prep time and routines.
Give and go.
As we get ready for the 2025-26 season, I know each year, regardless of level, whether it's the pros, the colleges, the high schools, there's always points of emphasis in officiating in all sports. With college basketball, what are some points of emphasis that you're hearing from the NCAA as we get into the 2025-26 season?
Sure. They always want to keep reducing physicality because it gets, the athletes get bigger, stronger, faster every year. So they don't want the game so physical. But, the big thing is we changed the continuation rule to add like another step after you've picked up the ball and you get fouled, you get another step and can finish, or could be considered in the act of shooting. That's a big one. That's one where you have to retrain yourself because you've been trained a certain way for such a long time. Another one that's really big that you will see because they're trying to speed up the game is reviews, the coach reviews. Okay. And there's, for example, like out of bounds plays, the coach can challenge it all 40 minutes. If you're successful, you get another one. If not, if you're wrong, you challenge a play like an out of bounds play and you're wrong, it costs you a timeout and you got no more challenges left. So I would tell you those are the two big ones, is the continuation one and the review one. Those are the two major ones.
And as part of your role, when you're working here in the preseason and you're prepping with these new rule changes, in your role as an official, does the education piece tie into that too, where you are working with coaches or anybody just to help explain some of these new rules, whether it's coaches, players? Do the officials help with that?
Yeah, we do. Whether we get assigned, let's say a closed scrimmage, if you go work a practice at a school, even when you have exhibition games and stuff, they're asking questions and you're, trying to answer them the best you can. So that way, when the ball gets thrown up at the start of the season, then everybody's on the same page and there's no confusion. So it's nice when you can go do that at a practice and you can talk about like, hey, can I challenge that type of play? Yes. Or how do I do this? Do I got to give you the twirly finger after I call a timeout? Yes, that would be the protocol to do it. So we're all in this together because we want it to go smooth and make it look right. And at the bottom line, get to play right.
Yeah. And what a way to grow the game through that when you're working with coaches, when you're working with players. I know that when I was coaching, I'd always bring in 4 or 5 officials to work a close scrimmage. And part of that was to have them talk to our players about points of emphasis. And our players would sit down, they'd stand up just almost like they were a teacher in class and just say, okay, here are some of the things that we're looking through. If we had to do an example on the court, I always felt as a coach that that dialogue was healthy. It was beneficial. It helped everybody at the end of the day to grow the game. So that's awesome that's continuing at the highest levels that you're at there, Kelly, too.
Thank you, Kelly, for walking through some of the rule changes, points of emphasis. It's always interesting as fans get ready to watch college basketball on TV, and we see some of these incorporated in game. It'll be good to give our listeners kind of this advanced knowledge of what to expect here as they're watching games. We're going to transition to 2 more sponsor ads now. Charles Schwab, looking for trusted financial guidance close to home? Visit Schwab's Sioux Falls, South Dakota branch, your local investment firm. Led by Lonnie Struckman and Zach Hansen, financial consultants with over 25 years of combined experience, their team is here to help you reach your financial goals. Whether you're planning, investing, or just have questions, Lonnie, Zach, and their team put clients first every time. Call 605-231-4844 or search Schwab Sioux Falls at schwab.com to book your appointment today. Charles Schwab, own your tomorrow.
And I'd also want to take a moment to thank the team at Insight. They're the folks who helped us with the visual assets to bring this podcast to life. And I can tell you, they don't just make things look good. They're going to dive in, ask the right questions, and come back with great ideas that actually work. Whether it's branding, campaigns, or creative strategy, Insight has a way of helping businesses stand out and connect with people in meaningful ways. If you're looking for a partner to make an impact on your business, check them out at insightmarketingdesign.com.
You're listening to State of Hoops, a South Dakota basketball podcast with special guest Kelly Pfeifer. Kelly, I want to get into a little bit kind of the craft of officiating, the technical nature of it. Walk us through some of your in-game communication with your colleagues. How do you balance that? You know, as you're working a game with a 3-way crew, when it may be hard to hear in an arena. How talk about the in-game communication with your fellow officials that you're working the game with?
Sure. That's a good question. It can be different every night, right? You work with guys in the conference you're working with that night. Some you might have worked with before, some you might haven't. A lot of our stuff is, talking in pregame, being ready to go. Hey, this is a conference game. We're just getting the conference season started. And it's knowing both your teams, right? But it's also knowing what your partners have called and seeing how the game flows. If there is a illegal screen at this end and there's one at the other end, I can't miss it. And you're trying to be consistent both ways. And some of that is the communication part, is knowing what your partners are calling, right? So that's a big one. And also, if a player is coming up and asking questions, hey, what did I do wrong? Well, you put 2 hands on him. Okay. When you put 2 hands on him, I'm going to call a foul. Okay. So being able to tell that person what they did wrong, or being able to, if a coach has a question, to tell them what they did wrong. And then at the same time, there are times that you're going to be able to, you got to tell the coach, you got to tell the player too, hey, I might have got that one wrong. And that shows the human side of things. I hope that makes sense, guys, because we don't get them all right. And part of the communication thing is being able to admit that.
And as a coach, I can tell you when you're working a game with your coach-official relation, that you're communicating, you're having those dialogues. And the best officials that I ever had for our games during my time as a head coach, Kelly, were those that exhibited some of that humility that you're talking about too, where we're human, we're not perfect. I mean, we're not robots out there with referees or with coaches. And some of my funnier conversations with the officials would be, yeah, they missed a call, or I'd come down and say, I didn't call the right out of bounds play on that one. I messed up right there too. So, I mean, some of that in-game rapport, but at the end of the day, you're managing a lot of people on that floor, and that open communication goes a long ways into making sure that you have good game management. And obviously that's a trait that I have known that you've had for a while, that you work well with people. And that's, at the end of the day, you're reffing, but you're still in the people business out there. So it's fun to watch you in action when you're managing those things in those games.
I appreciate that. And kind of that goes along with this too, is like the table crew. the person that runs the shot clock or the game clock and the book, we tell them, you're on our team, because I got to be able to communicate, hey, I got a foul on white 3, that's a hold. I got to make sure that gets written in the book as foul on 3, not 13, because then it becomes, when you start having those problems, your communication isn't good, if that makes sense. So we're in the people business, and yeah, being able to communicate with everybody, players, coaches, the table crew, the announcers, to let them know what's going on as well. That's all part of it. It's all a process.
Yeah, speaking of the table crew, and you alluded to the new point of emphasis or rules with coaches' challenges, Kelly, earlier. Talk us through, we're watching a college basketball game at a major college level, and there'll be an end of game review at the table with the video monitor. And I scroll on social media, and of course the fans and the basketball pundits, it just drives them nuts. But there's a lot more to that process than we, the fan, I think, truly understand. Can you talk a little bit about when you go to a review at a table and you're watching a video, is there someone talking to the officials from a conference, the conference headquarters, like we're seeing in football now? Or how does that work? And when you go to that table for a video review?
Yeah, we are not talking to anybody. It's the decisions being made between us 3 officials there at the table. So we all will have input on it. You're going over there, and whether you're looking at it could be a potential timing error, right? It could be the clock stops in the last minute, the last 59-9 of a game, and maybe the clock kept running, and we're trying to stop it and get that set. We're looking at somebody's foot on the line for a 2 or a 3, which is a big deal. Is the game tied? Are you up 1? Are you down 1? There's basket interference goaltend plays that we're looking at that can be really, really hard. We're looking at a potential shot clock violation. Todd, you shoot a jump shot really close, ball goes through the hoop, I kill it. I'm going over to see if the ball is in your fingertips, right? Then I got to get the clock set right if the ball was in your fingertips. So there's a lot of different things, and then we as the crew make a decision, and that's what it is. And you'll see us sometimes put a headset on, and if we're looking for a certain angle, but a lot of times I have a toggle that I can find it at the table there. But yeah, basketball is different than football, if that makes sense. Those are some of the things that we're looking at when we're over at the monitor, and what you're trying to do at the end of the day is get it right.
That is interesting to hear, because I think when you guys go to the table and I'm sitting in my recliner right here, and you're always wondering, okay, what are these guys talking about? What are they trying to get right? And they're showing you working together, collaborating, communicating things out to the coaches. But that's valuable insight to the listeners here. You're hearing directly about what's going on. Yeah, that's, I don't know, as a basketball fan, certainly one thing that's changed the game, and awesome to get that insight.
Yeah. And I mean, it's changed since I started doing this. When I started doing, I never really kind of told you guys when I got into college, but when I got started, I was in the GPAC, and then I got into the Northern Sun. I went over to Worthington and did some stuff, but like Colin Capitan was the guy that got me started officiating from Yankton. Cappy was my guy. There was other people that helped me along the way, but he was the guy that really got me going from high school to college, and then helping me move on. But when I got started in the GPAC, there were no cameras. There were no cameras in the Northern Sun. So if I worked, an Augie Mankato game, there was no looking at a camera. And I think some of those leagues have some different things now, have review capabilities. And then as I worked and you get into the Division I stuff, you have more of the technical capabilities.
Great segue into my next question right here for you, Kelly. You mentioned Colin Capitan, and just a legendary mentor to so many officials across this state. And he was reffing when I was playing back in the ESD in the mid 90s. And I think at that time he was maybe starting to get out of the actual game officiating, but continue to mentor. Cappy was one of your mentors. Who else were some people that influenced you? You talked about working those first games with Bill Marquardt, getting you officiating, doing those things. Who are some of the other mentors that you've had as you've moved up in the officiating ranks?
Yeah, I was very fortunate around Mitchell here, I had a lot of guys take me out and get started. And, if you look around Mitchell, you draw a 20-mile radius around Mitchell and you run into Parkston, you run into Alec, you run into Ethan, you run into Mount Vernon, Plankington. I had all these schools that I went to, and Buck Timmons took me out. I had Dave Brown, Mike Pooley, Jocko took me out and took me to games. Scott Vandermillen was the AD at Mitchell High, and he gave me a lot of sophomore JV games my first year. And so I would be at 4:00, I'd be at the Corn Palace getting ready to throw it up in the JV game, and then would do the sophomore game. And then I would stick around and watch the varsity basketball game. And, the Corn Palace was full, whether it be for the women or the men. But I was very fortunate to have guys that took me out. Jeremy Grady from Salem, Paul Winia, Brian Weber, Bob Malloy. I can just keep naming guys that were really good to me. Andy Deinert, Corey Odlin, Tom Hook. We were all kind of getting started and officiated at the same time too. But I had a really good group of guys. Gene Hansen, another one. But there are just so many guys I can name. People were really good to me and helped me go. But Colin was the one that said, you need to keep going and trying to go further. And he got me to go to a camp down in Kansas in 2009. And that's where I started to break in for the Division I stuff. I had worked, let's see here. I did 2 Class B boys state tournaments, and I did 2 AA boys state tournaments. And then I was working college with that as well. And then I went to college men.
That is awesome list of officials. And like you said, you take that 20-mile radius around the Palace City there in Mitchell, and what a basketball hotbed. And for you to be able to be mentored and continue that, if I can tell you in 10 years, people are going to be saying the same thing about you as well, and getting people started and having that connection to that younger base of officials that are coming up. So what a fraternity. And that's those names just put a smile to my face, because certainly I've worked with them a lot through the years too.
Well, I got to add one more. My brother-in-law in Phillip is a referee, David Burnett, and he would call me and we would meet in the Lyman Gardens and do a game, or we would go to Chamberlain and do a game when I got started. I also got to say, I'll tell you another guy that he was a coach that was really good. Dan Sabers was great to me as well. And he helped me get into a district and do some games with McCook. Talk to Gary Munson, had me come work practices. There were times that I would play for a while against the Colonel kids, and then I would come ref, and then I would make a call, and Gary would be like, "This isn't a Class B game at White Lake tonight. This is Mitchell High School." That made me better too. So I got some good stories of those days too.
We appreciate you sharing those stories, Kelly, because, South Dakotans are proud people, and it just makes where you're at now more remarkable, but you have never forgot your roots there. So thank you for sharing those stories. We're going to have one more sponsor, Rad. Looking for high quality custom gear? Look no further than Park Bench Apparel, your South Dakota owned print shop. Park Bench Apparel specializes in screen printing, embroidery, laser and UV printing, plus unique gift wear for every occasion. Outfitting your company or team, they have got you covered with fully customizable team stores and corporate apparel. Find Park Bench Apparel at the SDHSA state events and follow the action on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Park Bench Apparel, wear an adventure. Well, as we wrap up our conversation with Kelly Pfeifer, I wanted to spend some time on growth of the game from an officiating perspective. And I thought it'd be an interesting conversation because we have Nate. You are a athletic director, activities director at one of the largest high schools in South Dakota, Washington High School. Kelly has refed at every level, now at the highest level. Where is South Dakota at when it comes to developing officials, growing officials? I know it was a major point of emphasis with the Activities Association for quite a few years. Where are we at today? I'll just open the floor up to both of you to kind of share your perspectives and maybe go back and forth on that topic.
A summer ago, I went up to Brookings, and Jerry Beers, Steve Scapel, Chris Long, they had 8 new officials start working at it wasn't really a jamboree, but there were teams there and they were working with younger officials. And I thought that was amazing. And I got out on the court and I reffed with them. And there were some very talented people. It's getting people started. And, social media has changed officiating too, because somebody might work a hard basketball game in Sioux Falls and knows, and somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. But these guys are out there, guys and gals out there doing the best they can, will get blasted on social media. And I think that has hurt high school officiating, in my opinion, because it's hurt people getting started because they don't want to take that abuse. Nate, feel free to chime in on that.
No, I completely agree with you. I think the biggest piece that we're working on here within the state association and as ADs and as we try to grow the game is making sure that we're increasing that crop of potential officials, lining them up with good mentors to help walk them through. I think with a lot of our varsity games, with our assigners and working with those that assign the officials, is putting veterans with some young officials, provide that mentorship. I do think social media has changed the game in a lot of areas there too, that when you're a referee, you have to have a little bit of thick skin. I always tell officials when they work or through conversations, if they're not noticing you a lot of the times, that's probably a good game or whatever there too,
Yep.
where the game flows happen, but you're under the microscope. And unfortunately, we have outlets that people can go on and criticize and do that. So part of my job too is working with our coaches and letting them know that, hey, we're trying to grow our pool of young officials. How we go about treating these kids and how we set the example for our fans is critical, because in general, the fans are going to follow the actions of the coach. And how they treat officials, how they treat the action that's going on the floor, is they're going to be the role models for that. So I think that's a big piece in there too, is having that level of respect and making sure those young officials can learn while making mistakes. So no different than in coaching or playing. You learn through making mistakes, and how can we help you advance your skills? So no, completely agree with you on that, Fife.
Yeah. And I'll add something to that. Like with we talk about the Corn Belt. When I was getting started, that made me a better official. Okay. And I mean, I remember reffing Chad Greenway, Mount Vernon. Here was this guy that was a really strong, big, strong, athletic kid, and going, ooh, he's different, right? And we have Andy Deinert has used that as like a jamboree and a training session. He was like a region coordinator here. And I've went out and refereed with guys in that, and I go, hey, this is where you build your library. This is where you build your plays. And if you can handle this game, let's call it the Ethan Hansen game, or I'm just trying to think of, like Roush, when he would have Langford and some of those teams that would come down, and you'd ref some of these games, and you're sitting there going, oh, this is going to be a state semifinal game at the Class A state tournament or the Class B boys state tournament. And you're explaining that to younger officials going, hey, this is the game you want to referee. This will get you ready for the season. This will make you better. I think we got to keep doing, as far as the Activities Association, keep doing things like that, and having guys willing to give back and go ref with a new official and be like, okay, hey, think about that play you had at 120. Let's talk about that one. Did you like that call? And that's just kind of how my mind is programmed. And I'm always working on stuff when I do that. And if I can lend knowledge to a younger official, I want to do it, because I think part of my job is to develop the next crop of officials. I think I had people that did that for me, a lot of the people that I named. And that's part of my responsibility now, is finding the next group, whether they want to do what I do, whether they want to work. Maybe their goal is to work the state B boys basketball tournament or the state AA girls tournament, or they want to get to college. I feel part of the responsibility is to help. When my phone rings or I get a text, my job is to help develop that next group.
Such a valuable piece, and just providing that instant feedback. And you're exactly right. You want to be a young official, jump in, go talk to those that have done it, get their advice. I mean, when you get to be around our age, whether you're an official, an old coach, an AD, Schlek, an old player, we're willing to talk to young people looking to start in that field and help them out. And and provide advice. And I think part of that too is that younger generation too being open to the feedback and wanting to learn and wanting to get better and advance. One plug that I'll put in is if you're listening and you know of people who want to officiate, regardless of sport, we're talking about basketball, feel free to contact your local AD at your high school. They are the ones that will have the connections to get you set up on a learning track with assigners, with people who are in the refereeing business. But reach out, talk to your local AD, and we encourage anybody who's interested to do that.
Well said, Nate. And one thing that's been fun for Nate and I to witness, Kelly, kind of as we wrap up here is, we just came off 6 straight years of coaching our sons in youth basketball. My oldest son, Nate, has twin boys. We started a team when they were 3rd graders. We went through their 8th grade year, which wrapped up last season. And we have now seen officials who refed our youth games at the high school levels, in some cases college levels. It's been fun to see officials like Chris Janish and Drake Lauer and Gary White. Some of these individuals, they started like you did, Kelly. And it's been fun for us to then go to a high school varsity game, go to a college game locally here and see the talents that refed our kids. They didn't need to ref a 3rd or 4th grade basketball game on a Saturday morning, but guess what? They did. And look where they're at now. So again, we want to use our podcast as a platform for good and helping create and develop more Kelly Pfeifers would be a great thing for South Dakota.
Well, I got to put a plug in for my wife. My wife has taken my daughter over we have Palace City basketball here in Mitchell, and my wife is the boss of it, of about 600 kids. And we started this, and they play we got the new high school, Mitchell High, and we got the wellness center over at Dakota Wesleyan. And that's gotten started, and it's fun.
Well, that's a good way to wrap up this conversation. Kelly, on behalf of Nate and I and the entire South Dakota basketball community, we wish you the best as you get ready to tip the ball up for another college basketball season. We'll be with you watching these games, and it's been so exciting to see your rise as an official nationally, and we look forward to keeping tabs on you moving forward. And thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us for this episode.
Hey, I really appreciate you guys asking me. I've enjoyed this. I enjoyed telling some stories, and Todd, I can tell some more. And if you guys ever want me on again, I'd be happy to do it. And I really appreciate the kind words. And like I said, thanks for having me on, and good luck with your guys as kids. And let's have a great basketball season.
Fife, appreciate you. Wish you the best with everything coming up. Truly, you're a great rep of South Dakota in our basketball community. Thank you so much for what you do, and we wish you the best, man. We'll be talking soon, okay?
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Kelly Pfeifer for joining the podcast. What a treat that was, Nate.
Oh, that was great. And just thanks again, Kelly, for joining us, and a great ambassador for South Dakota hoops at a national level, and what he has done in his ascent to the highest levels of officiating in the NCAA, but also keeping his feet on the ground in South Dakota, living in Mitchell, still have a very positive influence on his community over there and continuing to grow the game. So awesome to have Kelly on, and wish him the best as he starts his new season.
Yeah, well said. And that's a good transition. It wouldn't be an episode of State of Hoops podcast without the Bleacher Preachers segment.
Bleacher Preachers!
Thank you to all of you who engaged and shared names of the best basketball players who were also great multi-sport athletes. We received some great engagement from all of you as fans, both on the boys' side and girls' side. I'm just going to read a few, Nate. You shared some names on the last episode, but we heard names like Nick Johansson, Amy Burnett, Lincoln Keenholtz, Heather Sealer-Gaynor, Brian Swartz, Chad Greenway, of course, Ashlyn Copel. Those were just a few of the names that were shared with us. And there's so many more that we don't have time to read on the air, but what a legacy that we have here in South Dakota when you read names like that.
Yeah, and thank you to the listeners for being on that and getting back to us and reaching us for comment with some of those names, because there's a lot out there. And one thing I'm hearing from our listeners that I run into, and when we're getting feedback, is Wow, you brought that name up, and I remember the stories, whether I competed against him, whether I watched him as a fan, whether I watched him as a kid, and just a lot of interest that generated there with the multi-sport athletes. And Schleck, can you give the listeners a guide to how they can provide that feedback to us?
Please engage with us by emailing stateofhoopspodcast@gmail.com. You can send us direct messages on our official Instagram and X accounts or comments on our YouTube channel. The new Bleacher Preacher segment question is this. I don't know if you're aware, Nate, but Carl the Cobbler, the Rapid City Central High School mascot, just recently was named America's top mascot in a nationwide contest. And hats off to Carl the Cobbler. But in honor of Carl the Cobbler's achievement of putting South Dakota on the map, this Bleacher Preacher segment is we want to hear from the audience on some of your favorite mascots in South Dakota. Now, this could be current mascots or past mascots. I know, Nate, some of the very best mascots were in the pre-consolidation days. One that comes to mind is the Monroe Wooden Shoe Canaries. So I know you have your personal favorites too, Nate, but that's the Bleacher Preacher question for this episode. Share with us your favorite South Dakota mascots. What's your personal favorite or favorites, Nate?
Well, I think that's awesome. Rapid City Central Cobblers, probably dating back, it used to be Rapid City High, so the Rapid City Cobblers, but now Rapid City Central Cobblers. Shout out there to Jordan Bauer, the AD, for promoting that, and their selection is the best mascot in the country. But a lot of history there. I don't know. I just there's a lot of them that are out there. You know, growing up seeing that as a kid, and I think when you look through the game with kids' eyes, maybe you're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Sometimes you're not noticing the players first; you're noticing the mascots and the people that are dressed up, working with the cheerleaders and providing that environment. So it's going to be interesting to hear some of our mascot favorites from our listeners. Send those in. We're excited to hear about those, and we'll list some of those when we have our next episode.
Absolutely. Please let us know your favorite mascots as part of this episode's Bleacher Preacher segment.
Shout out.
It also wouldn't be an episode of State of Hoops if we didn't close with our shout out segment. Nate, who's your shout out for this episode?
Well, I want to give a shout out as we reach here the start of November. Some of our head coaches that have been in the game for 30 plus years as a head coach, starting new seasons in South Dakota. And I'm going to miss a couple, but a few that come to mind when I look at those who've had a lot of, who've had longer careers and longevity sitting as a head coach. I think of Bill Marquardt at Parkston, Paul Roche at Castlewood, Derek Roby at O'Gorman, along with Kent Kulsrud, who's at O'Gorman, Brad Poppy at Avon are some of the names. When you look at the most successful coaches in basketball in South Dakota high school history, you see these names, and there's also an asterisk by them indicating that they're still active and they're still out there coaching and positively influencing kids and their communities and their schools. So I've had a chance to visit with all of these that I mentioned through the years, and they've always that coaching fraternity really appreciates each other and leans on each other through the good times, through the tough times. So just want to give a shout out to all the coaches as they get ready, especially these as they put in the time. And we've had a lot of assistant coaches that have put in the time as well too. But wanted to name these specifically and wish everybody the best.
Thank you, Nate, for that. My shout out in honor of the college season starting. Some of the NAIA programs already have a game under their belt. My shout out is Randy Rosenquist Jr. Of course, he won state title or two at Dakota Valley High School.
On a DV.
Yep, great run down there for the Panthers. And of course, his dad played basketball at USD, but Randy Rosenquist, his stat line in the opener that Dakota Wesleyan beat Grandview, 22 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 5 steals. So that's what they call a stat sheet stuffer. And one thing I wanted to point out about some of the NAIA programs in the state, if you go to their rosters, both on the men's side and women's side, Chow, are littered with South Dakota players. And it's fun to follow kids who move on to in-state schools, regardless of level. But I wanted to give Randy Rosenquist Jr. and the DW men's program their shout out for their opening win and to celebrate the college season started.
I can tell you the fans in Palace City, as we called it all the time, Mitchell, will appreciate that line. And what a community and a history of basketball. We'll talk more about that in future episodes, but they love their basketball in Mitchell. Yeah, that's a great start, and what a community that supports its basketball there in Mitchell. That's a winning stat line by Rosenquist.
Well, that wraps up this episode of State of Hoops. Again, you can engage with us on social media, via email, and also find us, like us, subscribe to us on all the prominent podcast platforms. Until next time, yours in hoops. This is State of Hoops podcast co-host Todd Schlekeway with Nate Malchow. Have a good one.